Hey everyone. It was good how Isaac managed to insult both his mother and his father in the one offhand sentence. The reason, so those of us who had the good fortune to follow Pete's parenting skills over the last few years close hand will know what a miracle it is that he indeed noticed anything. It was ill toward. Now, I probably shouldn't throw Pastor Chris under the bus like this, but I was motivated by Raimundo's efforts this afternoon. So I found out I was due to give the talk today about an hour and a half ago. So what you're getting today is some rather hastily prepared notes. It is stuff that's been bubbling around in my head for the last week or two. So this is a very rushed effort to get it out on, in 20 minutes or whatever. So bear with me. It might not come out as polished as it probably should, but it is something I've been thinking about. And actually, interesting that we kind of just went through all those little testimonies there, because in a way, that's positive. And in a way, I want to talk about the opposite of that, the opposite end of that spectrum. And not to bring it down, but just to sort of speak quite frankly, I guess, about the realities of life, the reality of being a Christian for many of us. That while of course it's great to speak about and encourage each other when miracles occur and good things happen, we go a lot of our lives in the Lord perhaps not feeling as things are as miraculous as the kind of things we've just heard about here. And I guess I want to acknowledge that and then talk a little bit about that today, and hopefully give you some comfort on some of those things. So I've titled this, God doesn't owe you a perfect life, but he does promise you rest. Who's ever had tribulation and a trial? Put up your hand, and I'd be surprised if there's many who don't. Who's in the middle of one of those right now? Few less hands, but still quite a few. I'll stop. I won't ask you to put up your hands from this point on, but who in the midst of any of those trials in the past or right now feels let down by God, or perhaps has felt like you're not being heard, your prayer's not being answered? And maybe because of that, the kind of conclusion that you come to is, well, is God even real then? Why? The Bible promises that I'll be healed. They're as clear as that. So if I'm not, what's wrong? What's wrong with me? And perhaps people feel like they don't have much faith. Maybe they feel like it's way down here when everyone else around them, it's sort of somehow up here. I am quite confident, I think, in suggesting that many of us have felt like that from time to time. And just from the people I know in this room, and I don't know all of you, and I don't know all of you well, but I know there are people in here whose lived experience right now is one of perhaps really, really difficult sort of family situation, like separation from children or their loved kids, or maybe separation from a partner, or a really, really messy sort of hard situation that's gone a long time. I know there are people here in financial distress, like an acute, long-running sort of financial problems. There are people in here who have physical sickness, pain, probably constant pain in their life. That's a feature of their day-to-day, and they've got to deal with that. I know there are probably people in here, in fact, we just heard some people testify about mental health. Now, when that is fixed, however it's fixed, great. But for many of us, that's a battle. It's a relenting daily battle. I know there are people in here who are lonely and feel that loneliness has been with them for a long, long time and don't sort of see an end in sight to it. And in the context of all those things that we go through, you can be forgiven for thinking, why? Why am I not being healed? Why is my prayer not being answered? Is there something wrong with me? And I think that often it can lead to a sense of condemnation where you think, well, Either something's wrong with me, the way I'm praying, maybe I not have enough faith, maybe God doesn't love me, maybe God isn't true, and all of that can just add to the sort of another sense of kind of being crushed. And it's a dark place to be, and I think we should talk about it. And I think there's some comfort in the Bible for people in that situation. So I'll attempt to now come up a little from that rather heavy kind of start to the talk. Go to Isaiah and chapter 40 if you can. I think the first thing to say is, if you do feel like that, you feel like I'm questioning the very foundations of my belief in God, you're in good company, because Jesus himself went through periods like that. When Jesus was on the cross and he'd suffered an awful lot over a long period of time, he said, "God, why have you forsaken me?" Or "Have you forsaken me?" Words to that effect. And it wasn't like just this rhetorical kind of, or it wasn't a Dorothy, what a Dorothy Dixer is, where people sort of ask a question just designed to set up someone to give a nice answer back. That wasn't what he was doing. That was a genuine, "What is happening here, God? You've abandoned me. Like, I'm here, I'm in agony, I see no future. What have you done, God?" So if Jesus himself ended up at a period in his life in that kind of frame of mind, and if ever you feel the same as that, it's okay. Like, Jesus himself has been there, and Jesus has been through everything that we will suffer in life to give us that sense of, I've got something I can relate to. It's not just me. You're in good company. In Isaiah 40, it talks about people, like it talks about Israel, who was having similar kind of questions in their minds. Isaiah 40 in verse 27, I'll cut this down for time, but in the preceding verses, it's talking about how the people there could have comfort because of God's character and because of God's omnipotence. He made the earth, he sees everything, etc., etc. But in verse 27 it says, "Why sayest thou, O Jacob, and speakest, O Israel?" And so he's talking about like a large groups of people who might adopt this mentality. The same is true for us. We're the kind of people who the Bible's sort of saying here, you might adopt this mentality, this question. "My way is hid from the Lord," or my issues, my problems are hidden. They're not noticed by God. "And my judgment is passed over from my God." That word judgment means just claim. So people might think my just claim, my very reasonable plea to God is just passed over by God. That is talking to a group of people and the kind of mentality or the frame of mind they were in at one point. So again, if that is your thought process, you're in good company. It's totally normal. God recognises that that's the kinds of thought processes that we'll have from time to time. And he goes on to talk there about that he is listening, he isn't weary, and he will give power to those that faint not. But I don't particularly want to focus on the rest of those verses. But have a look at it yourself. Read to the end of that chapter in your own time. If you can jump with me to John in chapter 16. And just to further kind of reinforce, I guess, that if you find yourself in those periods of turmoil, you're not alone, and those thoughts, your experiences, are in fact normal. They are part of the Christian experience. John 16, verse 33. "These things I have spoken unto you, that in me you might have peace." Again, hard to talk with the time I've got about all the preceding verses, but if you're not familiar with the chapters leading up to what Jesus is saying here, have a look at them. But he refers to those things, and he says, "I say all that because in me you might have peace." And then he kind of says, well, he acknowledges that the peace is not going to come from their day-to-day situation. He says, "In the world you shall have tribulation." He's talking to the people who follow him and love him, and he's saying you will have tribulation. But be of good cheer. Don't be too dismayed. I've overcome the world. So what he offers you is not that you will never ever suffer, but that you can have, there is possible to attain a sense of peace, a place of rest in that turmoil. And in 1 Peter in chapter 4, just another verse in that sort of similar vein. 1 Peter 4 and verse 12. It says, "Beloved, think it not strange concerning the fiery trial which is to try you, as though some strange thing happened unto you." It is not odd. It is not, you have done nothing wrong. You are not unusual for suffering. Even if you suffer for a long time, it is not out of God's plan. As harsh as that may be to accept, it is not an unexpected thing. It is part of our walk with God. But rejoice in so much as you are partakers of Christ's sufferings, that when his glory shall be revealed, you may be glad also with exceeding joy. So I guess in those three verses, you do, I think, get the sense that life as a Christian, even someone who loves God and is faithful to God, is going to have ups and downs. I heard someone recently talk about life being like an ECG. Yeah, and I'm no medical expert, but when you see in the movies like the heartbeat, sort of someone on a monitor and the beep, 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 sort of going up and down, up and down. Like, there's downs, there's ups and there's downs, but the person's alive. It's when it goes flat and there's no change, they're dead. Again, I'm not trying to be flippant about it, but like that you are alive, you are living a perfectly reasonable Christian life if you are enjoying ups and downs. It's part of the package. I think sometimes we can perhaps superficially or out of context pluck some verses which are there to give us hope, and they talk about the healing we can receive, but out of context we can take that and think, aha, I have an expectation that every problem I have will be solved immediately by God. In context, I don't think that is what the Bible tells us to expect. And so if that is our expectation, it can set us up, it's not a great foundation because it will set us up for disappointment and confusion. Rather, we kind of have to read the verses also and weigh them that say you should expect the downs as well as the ups. Why is the next logical question that comes to my mind and may very well to yours. Why set it up like that, God? Why put me through this turmoil? Why put me through this torment? And again, we might not like the answer, but there's one to be found. 1 Peter and chapter 1, just a couple of pages before this. The answer, I believe, can be boiled down to this. God is refining you. And he will do so as long as you remain alive on this earth. Now, refining, as you know, like, why do you refine something? Well, it's to usually get rid of the impurities. It's to end up with a product that is better and purer at the end than it was at the beginning. And God has decided that is a process he's going to put all of us through. The plus of that is, obviously, we end up better than we start. But it's not always a comfortable process to go through. 1 Peter and chapter 1 and verse 6, wherein you greatly rejoice, though, again, acknowledgement, now, for a season, if need be, you are in heaviness through manifold temptations. Again, like acceptance that whatever you're going through may lead you to be in heaviness, but that the trial of your faith, being much more precious than of gold that perisheth, though it be tried by fire, might be found unto praise and honour and glory at the appearing of Jesus Christ. So God wants to purify, refine our faith in him. Now, it's an intangible thing, and it sometimes might feel like a bit of a vapour. Might feel like it's non-existent at times, but that's what he's trying to grow in us and refine and test over time. And he does that by letting us go through these hard times. In James in chapter 1, just a similar, I guess, to just kind of reinforce the same point, make sure I'm not just pulling random verses out of context. James chapter 1 In verse 1, we'll start in 2. My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into divers temptations or various trials. I don't think you necessarily have to count it all joy. I don't think you have to be overjoyed by it. But if you recognise that it's part of the experience and you know why, that's going to help. Know this, that the trying of your faith or the testing of your faith produces patience. But let patience have her perfect work, that you may be perfect and entire, wanting nothing. So whether we like it or not, God is trying to do a work in us. And I think he's trying to strike the balance between mercy, i.e. he has the power to deliver us from whatever we're going through, but he also wants to teach us lessons. He wants us to learn and be a better product at the end of it. And he's got to find the balance there, somewhere in between. The last, I guess, kind of element, I guess, of these thoughts is, okay, well, if that's why, I might not love the idea, but okay, it's in God's word. That's the process I'm being put through. What do I do? How can I best deal with that? If the end result, if the answer to my prayer is not in my hands, it's in God, it's in his time, what do I do in the interim? How can I best manage the adversity? John 14 and verse 27, if you don't mind. So here's the promise again. Not that you will be healed, all suffering will be immediately removed from your life, but this I do leave, this I promise you, peace. Verse 27 of chapter 14, peace I leave with you, my peace I give unto you, not as the world giveth I unto you. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. It's easy to say, oh, don't let your heart be troubled. I get that. But when it's you in the middle of that crisis, and maybe it's been going on for a long time, it is hard to hear someone say, oh, just don't worry about it. Just take on the peace. Just don't be troubled. But that actually is as simple as that in many respects. In 1 Peter and chapter 5, don't even turn there. It just says, cast all your cares upon me. And I think it implies this really active kind of thought process whereby when you feel that turmoil, whatever the negative emotions is, that you stop that train of thought. You don't let the natural mind take it where it will take it, but you say, no, I see the principles, I see what God's trying to do with me, and I'm casting. I'm actively putting those cares, those worries over here. I choose instead to take on peace. I want to take on what God's promised me, that rest in the middle of a storm. Speaking of storms, just go to Matthew chapter 14. Maybe I'll finish off here. Matthew 14 is all about, this story anyway, in verse 23, is about a literal storm. And when he had sent the multitudes away, he went into a mountain apart to pray. This is Jesus. And when the evening was come, he was there alone. But the ship was now in the midst of the sea, so all his disciples were in it, tossed with waves, for the wind was contrary. So they were out doing their thing, living their best Christian life, or attempting to, following Jesus faithfully, and something had occurred in their life. They were in the middle of a storm and they were distressed. When they saw him coming, they were scared. They thought it was a spirit. But he said to them in verse 27, be of good cheer, it's I, be not afraid. And then Peter, in the middle of this sort of crisis of his life, or, this kind of calamity they were in, he said, Lord, if it be thou, bid me to come unto thee onto the water. And Jesus said, come. And when Peter was come to him out of the ship, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. I think this is interesting as well, just something to sort of, maybe we can learn something here, is that Jesus didn't come all the way to Peter in Peter's concern and turmoil. He came part of the way, he made himself visible, but then he said to Peter, you come to me. there's like a remaining bit that we do need to do. We have to take those final steps sometimes out of the boat, into the water, and walk towards Jesus. And that, I think, is that active process of saying, I'm not listening to what my natural mind is telling me, the doubt, the sadness, the despair, all those very, very reasonable emotions that we feel. But no, instead, I'm going to get out of the boat, I'm going to walk towards Jesus on the water. I'm going to choose to embrace rest and peace, and I'm going to demonstrate my faith, even though I'm not feeling like I've got the foundation to do so. And yeah, I won't go with that story anymore. There's I will just leave you with one more verse, actually, out of the New Living Testament, but it's in 2 Corinthians chapter 4. And there's a saying, a quote I like. It says, "This too shall pass." I don't know if you're familiar with it or heard it. They attribute it to some Persian philosopher. There might be a few Persian leaders kind of clinging to that at the moment, I don't know. But the phrase, it means... whatever you're in, whether it's despair and a hardship, or whether it's a time of like joy, it will pass. If the times are good, great, enjoy it, but don't attribute your happiness to God just because you're happy at any given time and life's going well, because unfortunately it will probably pass. And the same is true with the despair and the hard times. Although it seems to us like it's unending and we cannot see a way out of like the valley or the hole, we live life just as a vapour. We're here for a small time and we're gone. And in the big scheme of things, it will pass. God sees things on a timeline very differently to what we do. And so that is something, that saying is not in the Bible, although I think this verse comes pretty close. But I think it's a good way to consider the hard times of life. In 2 Corinthians chapter 4 and verse 16, in a different translation, it says, "That is why we never give up. Though our bodies are dying, our spirits are being renewed every day. For our present troubles are small and won't last very long. Yet they produce for us a glory that vastly outweighs them and will last forever. So we don't look at the troubles we can see now. Rather, we fix our gaze on the things that cannot be seen. For the things that we see now, the things we experience, the negative things that we experience, will soon be gone. But the things that we cannot see will last forever." Amen.